the ESG context. But our action plan for sustainable business, what we do is we identify the 5 SDGs that are most relevant to our business. So it's about focusing on people for sustainable growth, such as protecting seafarers' livelihoods and promoting well-being. It's about supporting the maritime industry to limit the impact of climate change and to realize business opportunities in a decarbonized economy. And it's about how we prevent and minimize the impact of marine pollution. It's about good governance and anti-corruption, and it's about partnering with others to drive sustainable maritime development within our sector and beyond. So let's look at what that means with some concrete examples. I'm going to start with something that's really the easiest thing to start with, because handling major casualties and pollution prevention, cleanup, and compensation is what we do. It's part of our DNA. And this program, the Gard outreach effort, is really something that we've done for many years. And what we do is we seek to meet, workshop with, and share information and knowledge with anti-pollution authorities. So these are the parties that will be involved when you have a major casualty. And it's important to have that opportunity to meet them beforehand to build that relationship and that feeling of trust. This prevents serious incidents from becoming a disaster, and it keeps loss and damage to a minimum. It protects the environment, protects our members' reputation, and of course, we want to keep costs as low as possible. But it also develops competence and experience in-house. Now, I wanted to give an example. This is history now, and it's an example of successful work to reduce oil pollution. This is tankers, and it's an illustration of how the marine insurance industry collaborates with ship owners, oil companies, multilateral organizations, and governments, with the result of tangibly reducing the impact of pollution. And this shows you the development of pollution incidents over a 40-year period. And this is just tracking spills from tankers in excess of 700 tons. 700 tons. Anyway, even though the fleet itself has grown a lot, you can see that the pollution incidents have reduced substantially. So I guess the point here is, in the maritime industry, we found good solutions to global challenges in the past, and through collaboration, we should be able to find good solutions to the climate-related challenges we now face. And let's turn to that one. Of course, we don't have 40 years to look at here. We need to make changes now. So one of the business opportunities that Gard has had is moving into the offshore energy wind farm sector. And in fact, over 20% of our premium now in the energy sector is coming from wind farms. We're also a member of the Getting to Zero Coalition, and this is an industry coalition with the goal to develop commercially viable zero-emission greenhouse gas vessels by 2030. So this is a coalition of owners, charterers, classification societies, banks, insurers, and ports. And I should also mention our internal operations. I mean, one of the things that you have to do is you have to look at your own operations. You have to measure your own carbon footprint. And we did that. Of course, we're a service industry. We're not in manufacturing. So our real imprint was in air travel. And of course, this year, it's been quite simple to reduce our air travel. But generally, we not only reduce, but we offset. And this is through participation with the Tor Heyerdahl mangrove farm in Myanmar. So this is a operation that's actually revitalizing mangrove forest in Myanmar. So that's used to offset. And then the picture on the right there, that's a fish farm, and we're also moving into this industry in terms of covering property risks. And of course, aquaculture is a very important method to sustainably feed the future populations and also take stress off the wild stocks. Another example, sustainable ship recycling. Now, ships have a life cycle, and when that ship's useful life is at an end, it should be recycled in an environmentally sound and safe manner. There are national and EU regulations in place, but there's no international convention yet in place. Now, our board of directors led the way in helping Gard to establish a common approach to sustainable ship recycling. And we've published clear commitments and recommendations based on the Hong Kong Convention for the Safe and Environmentally Sound Recycling of Ships, even though the convention is not yet in force. We're also signatory to the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative, and that's a cross-sectoral coalition calling for increased transparency around ship recycling practices. In other words, signatories show what their practices are, and transparency allows stakeholders to decide with whom they wish to do business. Okay, so, ships employ crews, and it's very, very important to promote the livelihood and protect the well-being of seafarers. And this is a key goal for Gard. Now, you probably have read that seafarers have been forced to remain on board after their contract periods because many port states have refused crew changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Gard was invited to join a cross-industry COVID-19 task force to find immediate practical solutions to the disruption in the ocean-related global supply chain caused by COVID-19. The task force includes representatives of other UN agencies, including the International Maritime Organization, the World Health Organization, trade associations such as the International Chamber of Shipping, and we have coordinated our input with the international group. So the task force recommended to governments and leaders of the G20 to make seafarers key workers so that we could facilitate crew changes. And this was a complete employee initiative. One of my colleagues, Alice Amundsen, and I got together with a few others, and we arranged to initiate a program we called Guard Our Oceans. And this is to empower our employees to go out during national beach cleaning periods and actually clean up. So you'll see on the left-hand side, that's the group that cleaned up Merdo, which is an island off of Arendal, in May of 2017. And we've been doing this on a twice yearly basis ever since. So, you think of Norway as being very clean, but that's 2 hours worth of picking up trash. And then on the right side, that's one of our colleagues from Bergen hauling what looks like fishing nets. And as you also may know, ghost fishing is a huge problem because the nets remain in the ocean and continue to catch fish. And this is also true of crab pots and other entrapment devices. So we cooperate with Hold Norge Rent, which is, and we have our branch offices join in their local communities. I should also say that Gard was the first company to adopt a beach in, I know I'm going to mispronounce this, Riot National Park. And our Merdo beach cleaning is part of that adoption. And we hold workshops with GRID, which is a UN environmental program partner, and our local NGO, Vaderstunder, nonprofit focusing on solutions. So this this effort, probably my favorite part of this effort, is what we do with local youth groups. Now, this is part of the Guard Our Oceans initiative, and these groups clean on the same days as we do. But what we do is we provide funds to these youth groups. They're usually some form of sports team. There's a middle school team, or not, excuse me, middle school class in here. We have the Scouts, boys and girls. I think we had hockey, we had handball, we had football, and so on. And what we do is we provide some funds to these groups. And living in Norway, as you know, everything is self-funded here. So these groups have to raise their own money to go to tournaments and trips and so on. So this is a way that we can push some of that funds into these groups, and at the same time, they learn about litter and they participate in their own communities. So this year we had 9 such groups, which is the all-time record. And I could frankly say that many of these young people know a lot more about environmental practices and the importance of climate change. And I think we as adults learn a lot from them in this participation. And if anything, this gives me some hope for the future.
And thanks to Kim for an awesome presentation. It's very nice to see that you're all awake and alive after this night's presidential debate. I'm sure there are some very hard choices to make at the ballot box this fall. And as Tyler mentioned, I was most recently the first vice president in Unge Høyre, the youth party for the Conservative Party in Norway, Høyre, and Prime Minister Erna Solberg's youth organization. And I've been an active member for like a decade, so I have some experience with youth politics, you might say. I left this position just a few weeks ago to finish my law studies and to work as a political advisor for the Conservative Party's parliamentary group, with the responsibility for labor and social affairs, as Tyler mentioned. The picture you can see on my presentation is the presidents of all the 9 established Norwegian youth parties, all the way from the Radical Socialists in the Red Party's youth on the far left to the Progress Party's youth on the right wing. And together with the CEO of the Confederation of Norwegian Enterprise and the leader of the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions, we all pushed the government for a commitment to full-scale carbon capture, transport and storage, CCS, in Norway. We did that before the local elections last year, and now it's becoming reality with the support of a huge majority in parliament. So we're making progress. Since before I became engaged in politics, I have cared deeply about the climate and the environment, and one of my key agendas has been promoting sustainable development and more effective and direct efforts to combat climate change, regardless of party affiliation or political beliefs. And I think that only if we use all the tools in the toolbox will we be able to succeed. And in general, I think that is why the Norwegian climate policy is working, because we have used a wide range of measures over time, regardless of who was or is in government. So I was invited to speak about what role Unge Høyre and Høyre see for the public-private partnerships and how companies can better collaborate with the public sector to accelerate progress in critical sustainability areas. And my presentation will fixate around solving the climate crisis while creating jobs and opportunities. And at the end, I will also talk about how companies can better engage with youth as a partner for sustainability issues, whether it is through the youth political parties or the environmental organizations or in general. So the Norwegian government spent a lot of money to fight the climate crisis. Some would say that we spend too little, very few say that we spend too much, and depending on what you include in those calculations. But if you count all the direct measures that would reduce carbon emission, the Norwegian climate effort is in the budget for 2020 is larger than the budget for the state of Montana and exceeds $5.1 billion US dollars. That means there are a lot of money both for businesses developing new technology, research, new products, and so forth. So Norway have a wide range of instruments for implementing government policy. And I'm sure that you are familiar with a lot of these companies. They have in common that the Norwegian state have controlling interest in all of them. Some of these are even 100% state-owned. And this list includes some of the biggest Norwegian companies and of course a lot of public institutions. And two of the most important entities on this list is Enova and Innovation Norway, and also Nysnø Climate Investments. Enova is owned by the Ministry of Climate and Environment and contributes to reduced emissions. And one of their main tasks is development of energy and climate technology and a strengthened security of supply. And in order to achieve this, we need to invest more in innovation and technology development. And these new solutions cannot just be sustainable, they also must be financially viable. And that is where Enova comes in. It can be very costly and very risky for businesses to start using the newest and most green technologies. And Enova can make a financial contribution so that projects can still be implemented. Each year, Enova invests more than like 2 billion Norwegian kroner of public resources in solutions. And the budget for next year is just over 3 billion Norwegian kroner. Innovation Norway contributes to sustainable growth and exports for businesses through capital and expertise, and they provide grants for startups, innovation, and export and so on. And of course, we have the Nysnø Climate Investment Fund. And this is a pure investment fund and does not give funding directly to innovation. And their investment strategy is to look out for companies that lead the way toward a low emission society in energy, transport, infrastructure, buildings, industrial processes, and food production. So one of the most important measures we can take is to ensure enough capital for green investments on a long-term basis, and that helps accelerating the green innovation in cooperation between both private entities and the public sectors. And we have a lot of examples and building experience with this cooperation each day. For example, we have the Longship and Northern Lights projects. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. The Longship project is a milestone in the industry and climate efforts, and the project will both lead to emission cuts and facilitate development of new technology and new jobs. And Longship comprises funding for the transport and storage project, Northern Lights, which is a joint project between Equinor, Shell, and Total. And Northern Lights will transport liquid CO2 from capture facilities to a terminal on the west coast, the yellow dot there. And from there, the CO2 will be pumped through pipelines to a reservoir beneath the sea and be used in oil and gas productions. We also have the Tampen Hywind project. It's another example. Tampen Hywind, it's a 88 megawatt floating wind power project intended to provide electricity for some offshore field operations in the North Sea. And it will actually be the world's first floating wind farm to power offshore oil and gas platforms. It will also be the world's largest floating offshore wind farm and an essential step in industrializing solutions and reducing costs for future offshore wind power projects. In more specific terms, there are some sectors that still has a way to go and where businesses and government should work together to innovate and find new solutions, and public sector is one of them. The Norwegian municipalities and counties alone, not the state, just the municipalities and counties, procure goods and services and contracts for over 500 billion Norwegian kroner each year, and it's everything from schools and nursing homes to school textbooks and diapers. And most of it is done the way it's always been done, but there is a huge potential in both innovating and providing for this in a more cost-effective way. For example, could your company contribute to building public buildings more efficient and with lower emissions? Could we produce diapers or linens for use in the health sector that are easier to clean and more comfortable and has lower emissions? Could you provide digital technology that teachers don't struggle to use in every day and that students understand? Each piece of this is a part of the whole picture and one of the ways that we could both innovate public sector and find emission cuts. And the legal framework for public procurement gives the possibilities to weigh climate effect as much as 30% in the procurement process. And I would say that the possibilities in the public sector is endless. Also, we have transport solutions, especially in aviation, that could be innovated. Avinor, which is the company in charge of operating the Norwegian airports, it's 100% state-owned. They have a zero emission goal by 2040. And Avinor and their aviation industry partners are aiming to make Norway a world leader in electric aviation. And the goal is to make Norway the first country where electric aircraft account for a significant share of the market, and to electrify Norwegian domestic flights by 2040. And the future electric aircraft will be purchased by the airlines when they're available in the market. And Avinor's role is operating the airports and providing the required infrastructure. And in addition, the Norwegian government has asked Avinor to develop a program for the introduction of electric aircrafts. So this is this will involve possible incentives required to make the electrification of commercial air traffic. And I think there is huge possibilities with electrification in producing solutions in the aviation market, but also in the other segments of transportation as well, for instance, heavy transport. Lastly, I would mention production of oceanic biomass. This is just on the research stage, and when we go to this process with electrification and electrifying stuff that we use in everyday lives, cars, the power grid, industry, and so on, we will come to a conclusion that not everything can be run by electricity. So we need to find other energy sources as well. And biomass from the ocean is both clean and it's could be done in a very cost-effective way. So there is a huge potential in producing biomass for energy purposes, both in Norway but also on the world stage. I said I was going to talk about some tips to how to engage youth, and it's a lot of ways you can do that. One of the easiest ways is perhaps just to invite youth politicians to your business. We love meetings. It's very cool to meet business owners, and I think one of the things I've spent most time doing while being active in politics is visiting businesses. And I think the Norwegian youth parties are very forthcoming and wants to visit and wants to see what's happening in the companies, and especially if there's someone outside from another country that starts up business in Norway. I think this is very interesting for us to see. So on my Instagram feed, there's a lot of pictures meeting business owners and business leaders. That makes products and services for the common good. You can also arrange a sustainability day with workshops. A lot of big companies have done this, either with a cooperation with the schools or with their municipalities. And it's a good way for young people to come together, both to learn what's going on in the different businesses and entities, and also to give their input and weigh in on the decisions in the different businesses. You could also create a youth forum or panel, especially businesses that struggle with their reputation. Has done this in Norway, and it has worked very well. Equinor is one of these businesses that has done so, and it worked really well. And it's a very good way of having a dialogue with the youth parties and with young people, and to explain your business model, what you do, and how you are going to reduce emissions. You can also start a project together. Hensa Maurits did that with a lot of different youth parties. I'm aware that Kongsberg Gruppen and Lockheed Martin did the same as well. They actually sent a couple of youth politician leaders to the United States to visit one of the production facilities for the new F-35. Unfortunately, I wasn't invited. It was just for the politicians on the left side. That's very skeptical of the defense and the defense spending. So that was, I'm sure, a success. There's also a lot of different ways to engage environmental organizations, and I don't know how this is done in the US, but in Norway, it's very common to use the expertise in the environmental organizations to make business ideas more sustainable. For instance, this is a picture of Fredrik Hauge, who is the head of Bellona, an environmental organization, and they have a lot of different projects and cooperations with Norwegian industry, both on land and in maritime sector. And their goal is to reduce CO2 and metal productions and in aquamarine and other sectors that they have research projects with businesses and companies. So it's quite usual for Norwegian climate and environmental organizations to have those types of cooperations. I'm aware that a lot of the youth environmental organizations are doing this as well. For instance, Natur og Ungdom has done a lot of common projects with the mining industry, and I think that's a very good way to give projects and businesses legitimacy. Lastly, I want to mention that companies and the climate movement, when they combine forces, can be really heavy influencers on government policies. We have had a strong push for implementing a strong section about climate in the Norwegian Constitution, which was implemented, I think, in 2015. And we also has had a great push on oil and gas production, or against oil and gas production in Lofoten and Vesterålen in the north of Norway. Also, we have had a huge efforts to stop mining in different fjords and different mountains areas in Norway. So when they combine forces, they can really be great influencers, and I think it's better for businesses and companies to use the engagement of environmentalists and organizations in a more constructive and productive way to develop new projects and to innovate, instead of just protests against everything that has emissions. So that was what I was going to say, Tyler. I hope my presentation wasn't too long. Thank you.